Corporal James Tran hadn't spoken in 4 months when Ridgewood Veterans Care Centre handed him to the newest nurse on the ward. Not because she was ready, but because everyone hoped she'd fail loudly enough to be worth watching. Nina Caldwell had been at the facility in Ottawa for 22 days when Brenda Hollis, charge nurse of 11 years, decided she was funny. Not funny in a kind way, but funny in the way senior staff sometimes are when they've decided a new hire is temporary, someone to sharpen their edges on before a real nurse shows up. Nina was 34, quiet and precise. She wore scrubs a shade lighter than standard blue and never explained why. She moved through the ward without announcement, without excess, so quiet in orientation that the ward clerk checked twice to confirm she'd signed in. She had. She always had. Invisibility was a discipline she'd practiced for a long time. In 3 weeks she'd been given every room nobody wanted. The post-surgical screamer, the family with no translator, the veteran in room 11 who'd thrown a tray at the last agency nurse. She handled all of it without drama. That was exactly why Brenda chose her for room 4. Thursday morning at the nursing station, Brenda briefed her in front of an audience. Owen Park, a second-year resident who laughed at everything Brenda said, and 2 nurses, Tanya and Carol, pretending to study a chart. Corporal James Tran, 31, Royal Canadian Regiment. Blast injury, left arm amputated below the elbow, moderate TBI. Hadn't spoken since admission, fought off an occupational therapist, made the last nurse cry. Give it to Caldwell, Owen said. Brenda smiled, not a warm smile, and held out the chart. Nina caught Owen lifting his phone slightly as she walked away and filed it without comment. Ridgewood smelled the way every long-term care facility does. Antiseptic laid over something heavier that never quite airs out. Nina stopped outside room 4 and watched through the window before going in. James Tran sat upright, back to the wall, eyes moving in a fixed pattern. Door, window pole, sharps container, door again. Not violent, not irrational. Mapping every exit in a room he'd had no say in entering. She recognized the pattern because she'd done it herself, every morning, for 6 years, before she learned to stop. She knocked twice with the back of her hand, quiet enough to register, not to startle, and kept her palms visible as she entered at an angle that left his exit clear. My name is Nina. I'm your nurse this morning. I need to check your wound dressing. I won't touch you without telling you first. She didn't smile. People always smile too wide when they're afraid, and he'd know the difference. He didn't speak. She hadn't come to make him. She wrote on the whiteboard instead, I will tell you before I touch anything. You can stop me at any time. Then she pulled a chair to a 4-foot distance and simply sat, not checking her phone, not filling the silence, which was the one thing almost nobody in his 16 weeks here had managed to do. He tapped the bedside table twice with 2 fingers. Nina went still, not from surprise but recognition. It was a contact signal from a world with no business existing in a veterans ward in Ottawa, a low-noise field gesture meaning I see you, I'm listening. She waited 2 seconds, then tapped her chair arm once, acknowledged. Something in his posture loosened by a fraction. May I look at your dressing? She asked. He turned his arm toward her, specifically, not the room. She worked in a flat, factual voice that treated him as competent rather than fragile, documented what she saw, and stepped back to leave. He tapped the table again, 3 times, and made a short, economical gesture she recognized from a life she didn't discuss. It meant, stay. She sat back down, and for 20 minutes the room labeled impossible by the entire floor became the quietest, most honest place in the building. That afternoon she came back for vitals. He didn't turn to the wall. At the nursing station, Brenda was waiting for tears that didn't come. How was he? Fine, Nina said. Wound's progressing. He needs a consistent physiotherapist, someone whose face he can learn before they touch him. 4 different PTs have already failed. The method isn't working. The method needs to change, not the patient. Brenda brought it to Dr. Marcus Fletcher, who'd been at Ridgewood 9 years and carried his authority the way some men carry a title, loudly, and without much curiosity underneath it. He found Nina at the station that afternoon. 22 days, he said, and you're recommending we restructure care for a complex TBI patient. I'm saying what we've been calling non-compliance might be something else. His voice flattened rather than rose, worse, somehow. Document your vitals. Don't recommend therapeutic restructuring from a position you don't hold. Clear, she said, and went back to charting. 3 days later, James refused physiotherapy again. The PT logged him as combative. Fletcher ordered a sedation review, a 6-week psychiatric backlog notwithstanding. Nina went back to room 4 and found him at the window, watching 2 veterans play chess in the courtyard. The man in the red cap plays too aggressively, she said. He's going to lose his queen in 3 moves. 4 moves later, he did. James tapped the windowsill twice, and for the first time, something like amusement crossed his face. She told him plainly, I know you know how to communicate. I'm not here to make you do it on anyone else's schedule. I can hear you however you want to say it. He picked up the notepad that had sat blank since admission and wrote one word, why. Because the file says you haven't been listened to, she said. And I think that's the actual problem. He didn't write anything else, but he left the notepad face up, which hadn't happened before. Outside, Brenda was waiting. Fletcher's ordered a sedation consult for Thursday if the resistance continues. I'm documenting that I told you. Understood, Nina said, understanding it, not accepting it, and she'd never confused the two. That night she read everything she could find on TBI, selective mutism, and evidence-based communication in veteran care, taking dense shorthand notes only she could read. When Owen mentioned the sedation review the next day, almost casually, she told him it would make things worse. It's above our pay grade, he said. A patient's outcome isn't above anyone's grade, she answered, and he left without a response. The next morning she documented everything. The 2-tap signal, the notepad, the measurable drop in his resting heart rate and blood pressure over 4 visits, in flat clinical language designed to survive scrutiny. She'd just signed it when Brenda arrived early with Fletcher, and behind them, a stranger, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, dressed like a man used to being trusted with the truth of a room rather than a version of it. He stopped when he saw her. 4 steps down the hall, he said one word quietly, not to Fletcher, Wren. Nina stopped, took one even breath, turned, Chief Sutherland. Fletcher looked between them. You know each other? Chief Warrant Officer Raymond Sutherland, retired, said nothing. Just waited. We've met, Nina said, giving nothing away. Walk me through it, Sutherland said. Your assessment, not the chart. She gave it to him in the same clipped chronological form she'd used in her documentation. Fletcher stood very still through all of it. He responds to you, Sutherland said when she finished. He responds when someone uses a language he can hear. What language is that? Consistency, patience, not making his problem your inconvenience. Sutherland turned to Fletcher. Who ordered the sedation review? Standard protocol after 16 weeks of no verbal engagement. There's been no verbal engagement because the approach has been wrong for 16 weeks, Nina said. Sedation would erase the only progress he's made. Fletcher reminded her that a sedation consult was a psychiatric determination, not a nursing one. I documented it this morning, she said, formally. Time-stamped. Something shifted in his face. The specific discomfort of a man discovering the ground was less solid than he'd assumed. Sutherland asked to see the patient. Nina asked to come with him. He said yes. Inside, James's body tensed at the sight of a stranger. The old automatic tightening around rank that outlasts the uniform. Nina signed in short tactical shorthand. He's safe. He's here to listen. James held, then tapped the windowsill twice. Sutherland went still. He sat across from him. Corporal, I'm Raymond Sutherland, 3rd Battalion, RCR, Kandahar, 2006. You were in Helmand, not a question, with Sergeant Dufresne's section, the night of the Argandab breach. James picked up the notepad and wrote, How do you know that? A test, not a question. Because I read the debrief, Sutherland said. And because the nurse behind me was there. James looked at Nina differently now, recalculating. He wrote, What was her call sign? Sutherland answered without turning. Wren, because she got into places no one else could reach, and she always came back with someone. James wrote one more line and turned it to her. You were at Argandab. She'd been told, by people whose rank made the order permanent, that Wren was a sealed designation, that the operation had gone wrong in ways too costly to explain, and that her service record would read as a quiet medical discharge with no name attached to what she'd actually done. She'd accepted it. She'd thought she was finished being owed anything by that name. She said simply, I came back for Dufresne. James made a sound, rough, unpracticed, 4 months unused, and pressed his fist lightly to his chest. No translation needed. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, already building his defense. This fell outside approved protocol. In a moment, Sutherland said. Your patient just spoke, voluntarily, for the first time in 4 months, Nina told him. I suggest you add that to the chart. Sutherland stood. The sedation consult is cancelled. I want a formal review of this patient's care history, and a consistent care plan starting today. 1 primary nurse, 1 physiotherapist, no non-compliance documentation without a witnessed communication attempt on file. Fletcher objected that this was outside his administrative standing. Sutherland set a laminated ID card on the counter without a word. Whatever it said, Fletcher's face changed, and Brenda, reading it from a few feet away, went very quiet. Outside, by the window overlooking the courtyard, Sutherland asked how long she'd been at Ridgewood. 22 days. Why here? Because they needed people and I'm qualified. He said her old name again gently. I was done, she said. That was real. I didn't want to be found. He didn't push. He never had. The review's going to flag you, he warned. Your documentation is good. People with authority are going to read it. That means questions. Good, she said. Let it. He asked, almost carefully, if she was offering to become James's primary nurse. She thought about the 22 days behind her. Every room nobody wanted, every wiped whiteboard, every quiet erasure, and about a notepad turned face up for the first time in 16 weeks. Somebody should, she said. The ward review notice went up by 11 that morning. By noon, 3 things had shifted. Fletcher circulated a memo proposing exactly the care approach Nina had suggested days earlier, without naming her. Brenda came to the medication cart, arms uncrossed for once, and admitted she'd never actually read James's file before turning him into a punchline. "Are you sorry because it turned out to be witnessed?" Nina asked. "I don't know yet," Brenda said. "I think I need to sit with it." "Good," Nina told her. "Sit with it. And come back different." And Owen Park found her outside room 4, hollow-eyed, and admitted he'd deleted the video he'd taken. Not because he'd been caught, but because watching it back it hadn't seemed sharp, it had seemed cruel. "You'll carry that," she said. "Let it change how you walk into a room." That evening, James had written more than a word for the first time. She was not in the debrief, not listed. Sutherland called her Wren, she should be listed. Then, "Do friends lived?" "Yes," she said, "he told us after. Who came back for him?" She told him only what she could. "I made a choice in a dark place with bad options. That's the whole story." He wrote, "Not the whole story. Enough of it," she said, and let it stand. He asked, in writing, why she'd stayed when no one else had lasted 20 minutes. She thought of the man in the red cap taking his time over a chessboard, of what a room feels like when someone finally believes the other person isn't leaving. "Because you weren't the problem," she said. And then roughly, in a voice unused for 4 months, "Okay." 2 weeks later, the review closed. Fletcher was ordered into mandatory retraining in trauma-informed communication. 3 of his documentation practices were formally revised. His plaque stayed on the wall, but the ward felt different. Like a window finally forced open after years painted shut. Brenda started attending the occupational therapy team's ASL sessions, sitting in the back at first, then practicing signs alone in the hallway until she got them right. Owen filed a formal report on himself. None of it undid anything, all of it mattered. James began speaking on day 26, a word at a time, then sentences, then by the 3rd week, a full conversation with his physiotherapist about what his shoulder could and couldn't do. The notepad stayed on the windowsill. For the day's speech cost too much. On his discharge morning, in a clean shirt, he found her at the station and spoke without any shorthand at all. "You stayed. You were my patient. Before that." She understood. He'd read her correctly from the first day. "I came back from somewhere I wasn't supposed to come back from," she said. "And then I needed somewhere quiet to be useful." He told her Sutherland wanted the Argandab record reopened, properly documented this time. "I'll think about it," she said. "You're not going to stay invisible here. I know. Was that the plan?" "It was," she admitted. "Plans change." He shook her hand. "Thank you." It carried everything, 16 weeks in that room, and everything before it that had no official record and no proper accounting of its cost. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too, Wren." She let him use the name, just once, just there, and for the first time it didn't feel like exposure. It felt like being seen by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. She straightened her badge. Nina Caldwell, RN, no rank, no call sign, no record of a night in Argandab that could only ever have ended the way it did. Picked up the next chart and walked back into the ward. Room 4 had a new patient now. She knocked the same way she always did. 2 quiet taps with the back of her hand, and waited to find out what kind of silence she was walking into. Every silence was different if you knew how to listen. And Nina Caldwell had always known how to listen.